Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving straight into human brain anatomy. Whether you're a medical student or just someone who is absolutely fascinated by how we tick, this explainer is designed to give you a really clear, structured look at the single most complex organ in the human body. So let's just dive right in.
But before we actually get into the physical structures, I want you to think about this wild paradox. How does an organ that makes up just 2% of your total body weight, weighing only about 1.2 to 1.4 kilos, somehow burn through roughly 20% of your body's total energy? It's crazy, right? But that massive power demand gives you a pretty good hint about the non-stop critical processing happening inside your skull right this very second. Okay, to make sense of all this, we're going to take a structured bottom-up brain tour. First up is the survival engine, also known as the brainstem. Then the movement master, the cerebellum. From there, we hit the thinking brain, the cerebrum. And finally, we're going to uncover a really cool secret lobe called the insula. Starting with the big picture, your central nervous system sits super comfortably inside the cranial cavity. Obviously, the brain is protected by the hard bones of the skull, but it's also wrapped up in 3 specific layers of connective tissue called the meninges. From the outside in, you've got the dura mater, the pia mater, and the arachnoid mater. Think of them as the ultimate protective bubble wrap for everything we're about to explore.
Part 1. The brainstem. Like I mentioned, think of this as the body's ultimate survival engine, or your built-in autopilot. It's the literal physical bridge between your spinal cord and the higher regions of your brain. It runs all those foundational behind-the-scenes functions that keep you alive without you ever having to think about them.
Now, the brainstem is actually split into 3 distinct sections, and each has its own crucial autonomic jobs. At the very bottom is the medulla oblongata, which handles critical vitals. We're talking heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure. Right above that is the pons, which transmits signals for things like equilibrium, hearing, and taste. And sitting at the very top is the midbrain, involved in vision, motor control, and keeping your sleep and wake cycles in check.
You'll find the brainstem tucked right into the back of the skull, in what's called the posterior cranial fossa. It acts like a central pillar. It physically connects the spinal cord down below to the cerebrum up above, with the cerebellum tucked securely right behind it.
Now, zooming in on the front or ventral surface of the medulla oblongata, you'll see these really fascinating paired bumps. The ones right in the middle are the pyramids. These actually contain the white matter fibers of the corticospinal tract, which is just a fancy way of saying they are the nerve highways sending motor commands down to your body. And right next to those, you can spot these oval-shaped structures, which, appropriately enough, are called the olives.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What happens if we spin things around and look at the backside of the brainstem? On the dorsal aspect of the medulla and pons, there's this shallow, diamond-shaped depression called the rhomboid fossa. Because of its unique shape, it basically acts as the floor for the fourth ventricle, which is one of the fluid-filled cavities deep inside the brain.
If you focus on the lower, inferior triangle of that rhomboid fossa, right before it narrows down into the spinal cord, there's a tiny little bump called the area postrema. In the medical world, this is clinically known as your body's vomiting control center. Its main job is to literally sample your blood, detect potential toxins, and trigger a vomiting reflex to save you. So the next time you get a nasty bout of food poisoning, you can go ahead and thank your area postrema.
All right, moving right along on our bottom-up tour, let's talk about the cerebellum. If the brainstem is your survival engine, the cerebellum is absolutely the movement master. It doesn't actually initiate your movements, but it refines them. It's what makes sure your actions are coordinated, precise, and completely smooth.
Functionally, the cerebellum is divided into 3 lobes. You've got the anterior lobe, which manages your muscle tone and posture. Then there's the posterior lobe, which handles the planning and coordination of rapid, fine movements. Think typing on a keyboard or playing a guitar. And finally, there's the tiny flocculonodular lobe, which is a great word, by the way, tucked near the brainstem. That one is mainly in charge of coordinating the movements of your eyes and head.
So, we've locked down basic survival, and we've got complex movement covered. But that leaves us with a pretty massive question. Where does conscious thinking, your personality, and decision-making actually happen? Let's travel up to the top of the brain.
Welcome to the cerebrum. This is the big one. It's the highest and largest region of the brain, and it's made up of 2 almost perfectly symmetrical halves called the cerebral hemispheres. They're separated right down the middle by this incredibly deep groove known as the longitudinal cerebral fissure.
Now, when you imagine a human brain, you are almost certainly picturing the cerebral cortex.
This is the outer layer of the cerebrum, mostly made up of gray matter. And to pack as much processing surface area as possible into the confined space of your skull, the cortex is folded up. These outward folds are called gyri, and the deep grooves between them are the sulci. Honestly, that iconic wrinkly surface is basically the hallmark of human intelligence.
This cortex is highly organized. It's mapped out into very specific functional areas. You have sensory areas that receive signals from the outside world and motor areas that send out voluntary muscle commands. But the real magic happens in the association areas. These regions handle the complex, higher-order stuff, learning, decision-making, and uniquely human actions like writing and speaking.
You've probably heard of the cerebrum's main lobes, right? The frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. But wait until you see what's hidden underneath. There is a completely secret structure here that is so often misunderstood or just entirely overlooked by beginners.
Looking at the intact outer surface of the brain, there's a deep horizontal groove on the side called the lateral sulcus. The brain tissue bordering this groove, specifically parts of the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes, are known as opercula. That literally translates to little lids. And they act exactly like that, covers.
To see this hidden sixth lobe, we basically have to perform a little visual surgery. If we carefully pull back or retract those opercula, specifically peeling down the temporal lobe, we expose the hidden depths inside that lateral sulcus.
And boom, there it is, the insula, or the insular lobe. Because it's buried so deep, it is literally invisible from the outside of an intact brain. But it's super important. The insula plays a massive role in processing things like taste, interpreting internal visceral pain, and providing vestibular functions to keep you balanced. It is just an incredible piece of hidden anatomy.
All right, let's bring it all together with 3 key takeaways from our tour. First, the brainstem is your bottom-level survival engine. It keeps the heart beating and the lungs pumping. Second, the cerebellum is your movement master, constantly refining your coordination. And third, the massive cerebrum, along with that sneaky hidden insula, is the ultimate seat of conscious thought, complex senses, and literally everything that makes you uniquely you.
And that completely wraps up our explainer on human brain anatomy. But before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What surprised you the most about how the brain is structured? Was it that built-in vomiting center on the brainstem? Or maybe the hidden insula? Let us know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this focused, bottom-up approach to learning, make sure you hit subscribe for more simple medical explanations. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next explainer.